Hello and welcome back to the penultimate round of our first series on Le Mans Ultimate. We are here at Spa for the oNiD SimHound LMU World Championship, and we're just getting to the end of practice. It was going to be a very tricky race this evening. Quite a bit of rain at a circuit that is always pretty difficult. We've seen some hectic starts here on ACC this year as the camera is a little bit confused. As qualifying just about to get started. We're just moments away from that, but a very difficult circuit in Spa with infamous corners such as Erosion Radion. And it's going to be ever more difficult in the rain. Alongside me and directing us, as always, throughout this series is the wonderful Sam Grant. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm doing well, thank you, Scotty. We're looking forward to tonight's Spa. I'm sure this track would have been on a lot of the drivers' minds going to this series. It's known, to be difficult with a lot of cars, known to be difficult with multi-class, and obviously it's a whole new game as well to deal with it. So it could be very interesting. Throw in the I was going to say variable weather because there is a weather forecast. It's not, I don't think, set to be guaranteed rain throughout. I think we'll look at the forecast in a bit. I think you've got that on your screen and I don't, but yeah, going to be really interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing again the strategies the drivers are able to pull out the bag tonight, and also some of the great racing I'm sure is yet to come.
Yeah, currently we've got 29% of rain at a 40% average track wetness. It may be a little wetter in other places and a little drier in others. One of the nice features of Le Mans Ultimate for a bit of realism and an extra challenge. All of our drivers will be out on the wet tires if they've remembered to ensure they've got wet tires. I think we've seen one driver get to the end of pit lane and then reset back in because they realized, oh, hang on, I'm on the wrong tire. But yes, we've also got the endurance pit lane, so a much longer pit lane than what we're used to, just so we can accommodate as many reserves as possible for tonight. So you'll see some names that you're not necessarily familiar with, but haven't been in the series so far, just because they've sort of been on the reserve list and haven't quite been able to get one of the spots from people, from those that have signed out from the individual rounds. But yes, as a reminder, those in the reserve class do not score towards the championship. They don't even take away points from those in the championship. We have had a few drivers as well throughout series jump up from the reserve class to the full-time class, as a couple of people have had to withdraw from the championship. But yeah, hopefully it'll be still a close end to the season. As we've seen in the last few rounds, Ferraris and Cadillacs have been sort of the story at the front of the hypercar class, and it's still been pretty mixed in the GT3 field.
Yeah, definitely. Be interesting again, as you're saying, bigger grid tonight with the wild class and with the slots in the garage. But obviously with that comes, as per usual, more traffic in the pit lane for them to manage. And Spa, the pit lane, not the easiest of pit lanes to manage, but it is certainly a long one. So again, something they'll want to be avoiding as much as possible in terms of avoiding penalties. A couple places easily done to pick up penalties here, but not as bad as some other tracks, that's for sure. We see here well, I was going to say who that is. Let me actually who it is, because I don't actually know driver info. There we go. That's Elvin Blomqvist as he starts his first flying lap, really long lap here, obviously at Spa, heading towards turn one. Very tricky braking spot, particularly going to be very tricky at the start of the race. There's a little bit of a wiggle from the tail there as Elvin tries to wrestle that car and get the power down for the long run up the hill towards the Kemmel Straight. Obviously, crucial corner turn one, and obviously even more some crucial corners here is Erosion Radion. You've got to get that right, otherwise you're not just going to be losing out time, but potentially picking up damage and ending up in the walls.
Yeah, we've seen how easy it is to make a mistake. Will be even easier in these wet conditions as you try and thread the needle with the car on its limit of grip up over the crest of Radion. And we see here fastest opening sector so far from Blomqvist. As we are with the longer lap, of course, we're yet to see our first time on the board. We're expecting times maybe around 2:10-ish as a rough estimate in these conditions. but the rain has meant that the track's actually got a little bit wetter. It's up to 60% average wetness across the board, 31% rain, so it's getting a little bit quicker. So it could be a factor that the early laps, these opening flying laps, could be very pivotal.
Yeah, certainly. You know, the drivers might see that. Obviously, we don't see it on the stream, unfortunately, but they might see that rain is coming. And, you know, and this might be the driest track will be. They don't know. Maybe we don't know. There's a little bit of error there from Elvin, but you know, these are crucial. At least, you know, get this lap in. It doesn't matter if it's slightly slower, but get it in, get it valid, so you've got something on the board, and that'll give you a little bit of you know, a weight off your mind, and it'll give you you know, a bit more help to push and understand where you can be a bit quicker. Obviously, Elvin here setting purple sectors as he goes through as the first flying car, waiting to set up, pretty much nowhere really you can go wrong at this point. Just get it inside tracked into, of course, final chicane to go, the bust up chicane, infamously heavy on the brakes there. Wait, basically turn in, avoiding all the cars, go too deep, which Elvin looks to have done slightly, but keeping it on the circuit at least. Again, final corner, tricky to not get the power down. You know, you're gonna rush to get the power down, tricky to not do it too soon, and again have a bit of a wiggle, but comes across the line with a 2:17.5 and leading the way and setting a benchmark, as Manders looks to be a second behind that, it seems.
Yeah, 1.1 seconds off Silver and Tomlinson, 1.5 and 2.3 off respectively. So yeah, we'll start to see the first times come in. Still waiting for the first GT3 times to come in. Of course, those cars a little bit slower, going to take them a little bit longer. But Dave Wood really struggling, starting their second flying lap, running into the gravel, and it's basically lap over already. It's going to be another 18 seconds until they get to start another lap. We're getting our first times in now for the GT3 field. Vespers putting in the benchmark so far, 2:35.2, and yeah, we'll just let those times come in. Seddon Tuck currently has got himself up to second place. That's the Sun Angel now into the chicane. Is 2 personal bests, 3/4 of a second off through the middle sector. So we'll be looking at potential P3 here up to the line, and will go purple in the final sector, and locks the rears up, just turning in for the source, sliding that car, struggling for traction on the exit, waiting for the all-wheel drive of the Peugeot hypercar to kick in. But yeah, up to P3 now for Angel as everyone goes on their second laps. Trying to see the car bouncing over the curb there at Radeon, just how much on the limit. You know, it's usually an easy flat-out corner in the hypercars in the dry, but in the wet it is a bit of a scary corner, if anything.
It is, and we can see all that spray zones there, you know, flicky up behind. That's going to really affect visibility. Visibility always a big challenge, you know, in the rain. Sure, you know, struggling with the grip and wrestling with that is one thing, but when you can't see anything, can't see the corner, can't see the car ahead of you, that adds a whole new level of difficulty to it. So Angel here coming through. Not quite no name, but the corner before, you know, down in that first sector, as you were saying, as I said, Touch said, also sneaking up to second, goes purple in the first sector in that Cadillac by nearly 3/10 as well. So a little bit of a margin there for him to maybe relax a little bit. Doesn't do so well in the second sector, unfortunately. Not only was it considerably slower than the best sector too, but also worse than his personal best, and decides to pull over and reset to the garage. Maybe there's a couple of drivers that know something we don't, as a few hypercar drivers have returned to the garage and sat there for a while, I've seen, and now are indeed making their way out again, maybe seeing something with the weather, maybe getting a new set of boots, maybe just getting as much out of all the tyres, you know, as much as they can. There's Lindblom also slots into P11 in the background.
Yeah, of course, with the very long lap time we have here, drivers won't get in as many laps as they're used to. It will be even fewer when we get to the next round, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But Alfie Bevan slots themselves up to P6, but 2 seconds off after the final sector. James Cowley now coming up to the line. Can they improve on P3? No, doesn't look like it. So they'll go on for another lap. So 6 minutes, 20 seconds left on the clock. That's only really about 3 more flying laps for most of these drivers. But watching Johnny Ashley, who's been doing very well in this series, has had back-to-back wins in the last 2 races, and will be hoping to continue that run of form, but currently sitting down in P7 at the moment. It's not looking too good so far, 2 personal bests, but is currently 1.3 seconds off the top time after the second sector.
Indeed, and I think actually also changing his livery tonight to help us with distinguishing some of the Mustangs in the GT3 field. Obviously coming towards the final couple corners here towards the bus stop chicane onto the brakes. Look how much puddles there are on the circuit. I've been told in terms of physics is concerned, the puddles aren't indicative of really where the water is, unfortunately, but certainly could look at as Johnny actually it gets the power in a bit too early, a bit too eager to get out of the corner, and will obviously lose a whole heap of time as he will eventually cross the line, and obviously doesn't improve there, unfortunately.
Yeah, Johnny, that's the most annoying place to make a mistake as well, because it doesn't just ruin the lap you're on, but the lap after. Luckily, Spa, short start finish line, and the timing line's actually quite far down. It's actually where the start line is rather than where you'd typically see the timing line in most configurations of Spa. So hopefully he hasn't lost too much time starting the next lap, but yeah, we'd really will be wanting to put an extra lap in. Maybe cursing himself for making it as wet it is. The rain is just got slightly heavier. And as you mentioned, the puddles, they don't have any actual extra physics to them. You know, you drive through them, the car isn't going to aquaplane or twitch around on them. They don't really do anything. They're just an indication of how wet the track is. We've now got Alfie Bevan in the Cadillac, not improving on this most recent lap. Currently sitting down in P6, only improving in the middle sector, but slower in the first and final sector. We'll go on for another lap. Alfie Bevan at the moment, trying to see, is currently 1.3 seconds off the top time, still set by Blomqvist from the start of the session pretty much.
Yeah, indeed. You know, I'm looking at a lot of drivers. I can hardly see any improvements, really. I can see, again, a lot of drivers reset to pits, a new set of tyres maybe coming out again. Maybe, you know, keeping the fuel as minimum as they can. And with, obviously, with the wet tyres able to generate a bit more heat than the dries, not spending as much time getting those where they need to be. And, you know, maybe as well, that's just indicative of how many mistakes the drivers are perhaps making in these quality sessions, as they're attempting to push, making a big mistake maybe and really ruining the tyres. You know, not going to be improving that, so they reset and get some new ones. Zach Silver here currently resides in 7th. Looks to be residing there a little bit longer. He's only just completed the first sector, but is a ways off the best in class and obviously beyond his personal best. Now, track's quite cold as well, 16 degrees track temp. Average wetness is now 60% as well. Rain is about the same as it was earlier. But, you know, it looks to be at the moment like the drivers have pretty much, for the most part, achieve the best they can. You know, it's not like a dry circuit where the rubber gets laid down and each lap, you know, the track evolves and there's more time to be earned. It's raining, it's wet, and drivers look to be struggling.
I'll tell you why drivers aren't improving. The track is getting wetter. You said 60%. It's gone up to an average of 100%. Most of the track is near flooded, and that's why these drivers are struggling, as the rain has just steadily got heavier and heavier throughout the sessions. And so we are left with what was probably already our final grid order, not unless someone can really pull out miraculous time at the dang end of the session, maybe not having got a great lap in this session so far. Jacob Hine just improved up to 13th in the hypercar field from the back, was sitting 16th. So still some, was up one improvement, but I imagine Jacob Hine in the Lone Alpine would be wanting to get a little further up into the top 10 for them. But yeah, unfortunately, just missing out. Zach Silver coming up to line isn't improving on this lap. 2.8 seconds down on this lap. They're only 1.5 down from their on their personal best lap to the pole sitter. Angel 2, yeah, just everywhere you look, there is no improvements to be found, as the track has just got too wet at the end of this quali session for any improvements. Angel sliding into T1 even more so than they did a little earlier on.
Indeed, I did just spot a new joiner there, Javier Gomez. I didn't quite catch the second part of his surname. So Hypercar potentially going to be starting at the back of the field. I'm not sure if they've put a quali ban or if they have just joined late, but that's going to be suboptimal, shall we say. A wet Spa hypercar. We've seen the difficulties the hypercars have had trying to get past that, big chunky GT3 field. Sure, they're a much quicker car on paper and everything else, but they just seem to struggle to get through, and avoid all the GT3 fighting. Stevie Bain here improving the first sector, 6 seconds off in the middle sector. So clearly, they're just demonstrating, as you say, how much the track has become wetter, and just how much of a difference that makes in the more technical sectors versus, just bombing it down the Camel Straight. And again, in the final sector, they're not improving either. And unfortunately, 24 seconds to go. I don't foresee any big changes, but we will continue to watch the drivers struggle around and maybe get a feel for what it's going to be like in the race, and maybe try and practice some of these trickier corners.
Yeah, that's the big thing for all these drivers, is getting the practice in before the race. This is, a good indication of what the race might present to them, which, if you joined us yesterday on ACC, where we also had a very wet race. It was only yesterday, and I'm already struggling to remember what track it was around. Shows you how good my memory is. But yeah, it shows you, Monza, that's what it was. Where we started with heavy rain, and drivers were even spinning out on the formation lap. Such were the conditions. These drivers just getting their eye in, especially when the track is pretty much as wet as it can be. Vital practice, vital experience to have. Hopefully avoid making mistakes in the race. As even if I'm a driver that's a little further down the field, I'm thinking, people make mistakes. There's still opportunity here. But another thing should be mentioned: visibility is going to be very, very difficult for those down in the pack.
Yes, certainly will. We'll try and catch what it looks like on the formation, on the really short formation lap, just to give you an idea of how much spray is thrown up, with those hypercars, with all the downforce they are generating. I can't imagine what it's like to be behind the Peugeot, for instance. It's going to be very interesting and a massive challenge, as we were talking about. And I'm sure the drivers will just be praying they can get through the first lap until those gaps open up and they can, get into that rhythm, as hard as it will be, and then kind of assess the situation after everything's settled and see what they can do in terms of strategy. As we continue to watch Tim Bob round the final few corners in sector 3 here. Again, not an improvement. Just to give you an idea how much the GT2s are struggling. Goes wide, a typically fairly simple corner, but with this much water, I'm not surprised if we'll see drivers go beyond track limits on more than one occasion there.
Yeah, in the dry, as you say, you can just about take it flat out in a GT3. In these pouring rain conditions, with the track basically flooded, yeah, far from flat out. You really got to try and guess how much you need to brake, how much you need to slow down for that left-hander. So you just see how many puddles are across the track here. Okay, there isn't a physics element to them, but it does just indicate how wet the track is and how little grip there is going to be for the drivers. Of course, that may change when we load into the race very shortly. But either way, if the rain stays, which it looks like it might have, we'll get an indication pretty soon. Yeah, could be very difficult, as we're counting down to the start of our short formation lap.
Indeed. Let's quickly run through the starting order then. Let me click this button and away we go.
Well, here we go. Elvin Blomqvist will take pole position for Ferrari, joined alongside by the Cadillac of Seddon Tutt. Then Angel will get the Peugeot up into third to make it 3 manufacturers in top 3, ahead of Nick Manders in fourth. Dave Wood would be fifth for 3 Ferraris in the top 5, and Alfie Bevan making it 3 Cadillacs in top 7, we should say, with Zach Silver in 7th. Stevie Bean, first of the Porsches in P8, ahead of Tyler Hammer and Dan Tomlinson, rounding up the top 10 with an all Cadillac 5th row. Daniel Lindblom will make it 3 Cadillacs in a row in 11th, and Max Farrell will roll off from P12. Jacob Hine in the lone Alpine starts 13th, ahead of Fertoy in 14th. in the newer Peugeot. Charlie Morgan in the lone BMW will roll from 15th, with Dave Spiller, last of our hypercars except one, will roll off 16th. Sorry. Fitzparis will be the GT3 in 17th, ahead of Thomas Pustek in second place. James Cowley will go off third, ahead of Trink de Tass in fourth. Matthias Fuskin will roll off 21st, ahead of Athel Basker, who will be 22nd or P6 in class. Johnny Ashley down in 7th in GT3s for our championship leader in the class at the moment. They'll start ahead of Paul O'Grady in P8. Ryan Davies will roll off P9, with Tim Bob rounding out the top 10 and podium sitter from last time. Ben Brown just missing out on that top 10, ahead of Frank Vebeck in P12. Tom Watson will be 13th, ahead of Christian Schlink in 14th. Darren Wilkes and Ben Myatt will roll off row 16 in 15th and 16th in GT3 field. Olaf Badej will roll off 17th, ahead of Jared Page in the McLaren in 18th. Dean Smith will be 19th before a lone Porsche at the back of the field from 17th in the hypercar field, or 36th overall, and Ollie Knowles will be on the last row of the grid. We are getting racing now here in the background as it's green heading to T1. It's a dry start. We've got a couple of cars waiting at pit exit, and it's 3 wide between Cadillac, Peugeot and Ferrari. Getting shoved onto the gravel on the outside. That is Nick Manders losing out on the gravel from T1. They're now heading into a Rouge, usually a very difficult section of the track on the opening lap. It looks like most people, I think that was one car off, that's David Bean, has had a big crash, has lost a tyre, and is going to struggle to get that car back to the pits to repair it. Side by side in the background, Nick Manders trying to make up positions, gone back up to P10 from Stevie's mistake, and Charlie Morgan trying to go round the outside of Dave Spiller, and they come chicane, but Dave Spiller already up 5 places from the start as we look towards from Blomqvist still leading the way ahead of Tom Evans, had a good start up 3 positions. Dave Wood Angel falling down to 5th, trying to hold off Tomlinson and a 4-car Cadillac train as Tomlinson's got good exit here out of the left-hander down towards the corner. They go commit to the move, yeah, they commit to the inside. The Peugeot just not having the grip on this opening lap and will take P5.
Indeed, a bit of a chaotic start there, but at least it is dry and a little bit of sun as well to help. The track is still quite cold. Dan Thompson, as you say, trying to get away from this train behind him and get going without all this pressure in his mirrors. Leave these guys to squabble amongst themselves. Sun Angel obviously wanting to catch up to where they started and also move up positions, but yeah, terrible start for them so far, but long way to go, as we always say. One great gainer obviously from the start was Javier Gomez in the hypercar class, who started way back behind the D3 field as Jacob Hine here recovers down in P14. But Javier Gomez, only 2 cars, and those cars are D3 cars, behind Jacob Hine now, so on his way to catch up with the rest of the field. And indeed, we see that Porsche come into view in the background and will swing by Jacob, who looks to be going slower than usual. Is he missing a tyre, or is he the one that had an issue? Oh, no, that was Stevie Bain having an issue earlier. But here comes more contact. GT3 cars. That's Basker.
That is, yeah, Basker spinning out. The gravel being kicked up from after that incident with the recovering Jacob Hine. Pustek still in 2nd place within the GT3 field. But yeah, all carnage. Max Brown started from the pit lane, and it is just chaos there at Blanchemont. Unfortunate for Basker. I think they have got going again, but they've fallen down to 12th within the class. Jared Page looks like they've also had issues on this opening lap. But yeah, Jacob Hine not losing any tyres, but you can see the car was well out of alignment with significant steering damage. Very chaotic first lap, even though we didn't have any rain. It is some bright sunshine, in fact, in the dry conditions. Track isn't even damp at all. So yeah, but still very eventful start nevertheless.
Indeed, indeed. And Max Farrell also making his way through the GT field again, as you were saying. Christian Slick here on the back of Tom Watson. We saw him have a great run coming out of turn 1 and following the Aston Martin through Eau Rouge and Radeon. Sticking with P25 just ahead of him now as he has improved also on his first sector there, just waiting for his chance to start getting closer and closer. We've got plenty of battles also in the hypercar field. So Nick Manders here, right at the back of sector. We're setting a purple sector 1 as well, looking to get past that Cadillac. So obviously as Grease again edges his way into the inside there, going through Stavelo, I believe, onto the back straight. Now obviously just tucking into that slipstream, putting the pressure on that Cadillac. And obviously we can see Son Angel just ahead as well, watching this unfold in his mirrors. Also the BMW behind him, Charlie Morgan, watching this, trying to keep an eye open for any scraps and sneak past. Nick Manders looking left, looking right, down to the inside, on the brakes now at the bus stop. Side by side they go, avoiding the curbs, avoiding each other, keeping it nice and tidy onto the start-finish straight now. Nick Manders still behind, but luckily he wasn't too compromised whilst he was attacking the Cadillac there.
And Charlie Morgan's thinking that they can get involved in this battle as well, forcing Manders to go defensive into the source, which is good, and compromise them. And Charlie here's got a good exit. They're going to be side by side down towards Eau Rouge, squeezed up against the pit wall for Charlie Morgan, and in the end they back out. But the Porsche there is also going to have to check up in the middle of Eau Rouge, which isn't going to be easy for them, and it's actually allowed Limblom to get a run on Spiller in the Porsche. They're side by side now as they come towards the comment. Looks like the Porsche has held on, and it's actually got a move done on the BMW. Spiller now up into the top 10, having made up 6 places off the start, managing to avoid the chaos that we have had. Look to the GT3 field. Matthias Fuskin is currently sitting in 5th in the GT3 field, behind a good start from Johnny, up 3 places, get to P4 to try and defend that championship lead that they have. But Nick Manders now is going to try and get past the Cadillac of Silver to the inside of Huon. Again, Silver just holds it right the outside and will hold on to the place now. We'll be thinking about overtaking Angel that they're coming up to. Angel's about to have a 6th car train following with them, but dive to the inside for Manders into the Piff Path chicane. Looks like they're going to get done right the outside for the second part and up to P8 now, and we'll be putting pressure, first to put pressure on Angel from this train. As I imagine, it's going to be a very difficult couple of laps coming up for the Peugeot driver. Out of Stavlo, the BMW in the background getting all into the gravel. That's going to really compromise them, and maybe the Cadillac of Limblom behind past up towards the chicane now in the slipstream. We know that Peugeot is one of the strongest cars in straight line, if not the strongest, but that doesn't stop the Ferrari from going to the outside. The Cadillac's going to try and follow through the Porsche as well, but it's got way too ambitious. It's way deep into the runoff. It's going to have to make sure it rejoins safely and drop to the back end of this battle. But you can see the Peugeot already down 3, maybe even 4 positions, as Limblom is already side by side into T1, trying to demote Angel to outside the top 10.
Indeed, going side by side as they come out of turn 1 there. Son Angel, Peugeot or Peugeot, wing or without a wing, which one do you pick? Looks like the wing is winning as it stands. No pun intended there. Obviously Angel following now the other Peugeot up through Eau Rouge and Radeon, looking to get back again to where he was, missing out on these opportunities and dropping down the order, unfortunately. But again, plenty of time to race, and that's actually broken up this 7-car train, 7 hypercars there for several laps now, splitting into 2 segments. As there is another yellow flag for Dean Smith, unfortunately. Johnny Ashley and Matthias Fuskin also, while all this battle is going on, swap places again. So Fuskin still behind Ashley as it stands, and Dave Spiller slipping on by Son Angel, which may be some damage or something. It's odd to see Angel, one we've seen typically with great pace, drop position after position like this.
How about we pull up those tyre choices? Spa is one of the few tracks where we have all 3 tyre compounds, the soft, the medium and the hard, but that isn't what Angel has gone with. They've got a wet tyre on the car, which is very interesting, given that it is currently bone dry. There is rain subject for about the middle and later half of the race, but you can't imagine those wet tyres are going to be dead by then. so we'll have to see if that does overcome the pit stop loss. But we switch back to Ben Brown, currently P5 in the GT3 field, up 6 places from where they started, but might not be for too much longer. Polo Grady trying to go round the outside of Lake Cobb, just not quite far enough alongside, has to back out of it, and it's going to come under pressure from Trink to Tass. 3 of our oNiD admins all fighting one another, all in 3 different manufacturers as well. Polo Grady again looking to the outside of Ben Brown, but just not quite able to carry enough momentum to get the move done, and could leave themselves vulnerable to the Ferrari behind.
Indeed, up 3 places since the start is Polo Grady there, and Ben Brown up 7 places from the start. 6 places in his class, obviously, is the McLaren. They're using all the curb. Ferrari, they're looking nice and calm, nice and settled as they go through the chicane, which I thought they were at somewhere else, but either way, looking settled, looking calm, just waiting for their chance. Interesting strategy, obviously, with Angel there. We just mentioned their tyres. You have to think that that's a mistake. And speaking of mistakes, an Aston Martin there of Ben Brown has just made a crucial one. And actually, it wasn't the Aston Martin missing out there, but the McLaren maybe too close to the Aston Martin, having to lift off and just to keep going and avoiding contact, and let the Ferrari of Trigger Tass have a major run alongside. Now the McLaren still alongside, just gets past, going through Blanchimont, just outside of track limits, I would have said as well, the McLaren. So really unfortunate for them, not only missing out on the place, but also potentially picking up some points for a penalty. As the Ferrari now pressures Ben Brown instead of the McLaren.
And just look in the background, we have quite the GT3 field here. They're still all bunched up together from Ben Brown onwards. Looking at the timing screen, we've got a little highlight of when cars are within a second. It's just a full highlighted block there at GT3 pack. So yeah, Ben Brown very lucky that their mistake didn't cost them there. The Polo Grady just wasn't in the right place to take advantage of it and stop them from falling down the orders. Yeah, look at these cars spreading out a little bit as they came over Erosion Radion. Some drivers just having a little more confidence than others. As we see a spin for McLaren, it's Jack Page on the exit of the chicane as we see the hypercars coming through. And this is towards the back of the hypercar pack. I believe that's Spiller we just see there, and there is Angel still struggling on those wet tires, being caught by Gomez, who, remember, started behind all of the GT3 cars. And there goes Max Farrell as well, who started from pit lane this race. Still trying to catch up to the field, has made their way past all of the GT3 cars, hopefully cleanly. Of course, we didn't see if it was clean or not, but we hope it was, and is carrying on, trying to charge up to Angel, who, by the way, his last lap ran a 2:11.4. The top times we're seeing 2:03.4 from our leader Blomqvist last lap. And down to about 2:06s, so at least 5, if not 8 seconds off the pace for Angel on those wet tires. I would really be surprised if this strategy is going to work out for them.
Yeah, no, I would totally be surprised too, as you say. If the rain does come, the wets surely would be ruined. I think it's just a mistake, unfortunately, coming from a soaking wet qualifying. But yeah, that's just how it goes sometimes. Paul O'Grady here chasing down Chiquita Trass, who was briefly in a shot of attacking Ben Brown. These three crucial as the hypercars come through now. Got to manage this traffic. It goes both ways, obviously, hypercars and the GT3s. But if you can take advantage of it, why not do so? Ferrari closing in on the Aston Martin. The Aston Martin will take a compromised line into the bus stop, and that's helped out the Ferrari a little bit. Obviously, Ferrari letting these hypercars go on the straights, and once again, the hypercars just catching the Aston Martin in the braking zone, which is kind of the worst place, the most annoying place for you to do it if you're having to compromise or move out the way whilst already putting a load of pressure onto the brakes and trying to avoid lockups. But yeah, we're starting to see that field come through now, and luckily they've done it before Origin Radion has appeared. But yeah, all going in that right direction, and yeah, that group of GT3 cars unrelenting, still there like we've seen in previous races, and I think it's going to be like this for a while, which is obviously great stuff for us to watch.
Yeah, the hypercars have spread out amongst themselves a little bit, which is going to make things a little easier for the GT3s, who aren't going to make things easy for the hypercars. They've got multiple cars to get past. As we see, Ryan Davies has had an incident. Trying to see where this is. This is already on, and you can guarantee with the speed that the cars take through here is usually a big one. Oh, that looks like a technical issue. Steering wheel. This car just suddenly goes straight on into the wall, and yeah, unfortunately, yeah, issues there for Ryan Davies. But we cut back to this battle. Actually cuts the lead of the hypercar, set in touch, putting the pressure on Elvin Blomqvist at front of this field, as they've now made their way through most of the GT3s, and will be, I think, let me just check on my end, still have a couple more of the front runners. By the way, Johnny Ashley, who is now up to a podium place in the GT3 field, 18 seconds behind second place GT3 driver Postek still, so that shows you big gap has formed between the front two and everyone else. 7 seconds between Fuskin and Ben Brown in 4th and 5th. But yeah, that's just giving the hypercars a little bit of breathing room for this battle to start. They're going to come on a couple more GT3 fields. And we were mentioning that wet tyre strategy. The rain has come a little bit earlier than we predicted. You can see those wipers are on. You can, if you look closely, the drivers at the cars, the raindrops are forming on the cars. The setup looking all over the back end of the Ferrari. Track is starting to get wet again as these drivers get ever so close to touching in the middle. A flash of the lights from Set and Tut as they're now going to start making their way through a couple of GT3 cars. Luckily for them, it's on the straight. Are they going to go straight wide into the come? Not quite, but into the pits where a lot of our hypercar runners, or sorry, a lot of our GT3 cars are in the pits. Only a couple of the hypercars. Looks like people starting to make this swap to wet tyres. The rain at about 11% at the moment, but the track only 5% dampness really at this point. But things are going to start moving along as the track starts to get wetter and wetter. I'm running a little wide through left-hander, a couple of wheels into the gravel, but gets going, keeps it in the straight line. Let's drop back a little bit from Blomqvist, giving them a little bit of breathing room as they explore the ever-changing conditions.
Indeed, and Matthias Fuskin there and Johnny Ashley continuing their battle in the pit lane, it seems. So very interesting. I can't imagine Johnny wanting to nail that entry, and certainly Matthias Fuskin obviously wanting to nail the entry. So crucial to practice that at every circuit if you are unfamiliar with it, particularly in changeable positions. But those guys obviously will be mind gaming, I'm sure. Oh, as oNiD loses the rear massively and actually has already lost a rear wing, which would totally explain that incident. I'm sure there are many more of those to come. Last week, unfortunately, we saw a car lose a rear wing and struggle so much just to get going onto the circuit again. I believe it was last week at Fuji. They just had to return to the garage and unfortunately retire from the race. oNiD's struggling and will continue to do so, I'm sure, particularly with the rain coming down. That's terrible, detrimental to their race after they had such a great start, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was Matt Webb that really struggled in the dry conditions. I can imagine how much oNiD is going to struggle in the wet conditions. You almost need to just stick the pit limiter on and, yeah, not go above the 60 kilometers an hour. Already lost the rear wing so early in the lap two. You know, this is just at the end of the first sector. The second sector is a minute long itself. So yeah, just having that first spin under braking, you've just got to be so cautious when you don't have your rear wing. And we cut back to live images now, I believe, and facing the wrong way in a wall. I'm not sure they're going to be able to get that car back to pit lane.
Indeed, and let's just pull on the tyres quickly on the screen, just so we can see who has chosen to stop and who's continuing on. The top 4 runners in the hypercar class there, moving on and electing not to pit, you know, managing those conditions as it stands, maybe seeing that the rain isn't supposed to last that long, or at least thinking, I'll at least let the others go through the pit lane, I'll go in and maybe get some tyres. But that's an interesting choice. You have to imagine if the other guys are going to come out and have that undercut advantage against the hypercars on track. I'm seeing some yellow flags pop up all over the place. Unfortunately not catching who that is, but certainly we can imagine the drivers struggling with the conditions. Is there much on the forecast, Scotty? Is it going to last long?
It looks like it'll last to the end of the race. We weren't expecting rain until sort of 36 minutes-ish. So yeah, the rain has actually come early. I think that's what's caught out a few of these drivers. We've seen a lot of them rush to pit lane, but some of them have stayed out. I've actually just noticed SimHound has taken the lead of the race from Blomqvist. Now, Manders is currently up to P3, having not pitted. Farrell up to 4th, but Angel already in front of Charlie Morgan on those soft tires. As we see Charlie struggling into the wall, they've lost their rear wing now. So that's going to be real painful for them to get back to the pits as the track just continues to get a bit wetter and wetter. Our leading pair of hypercars are into the pits now, and yeah, luckily for them, they had a bit of a gap to the cars behind, so they shouldn't be undercut. And you know, they've survived, which is the main thing. The advantage that they're going to get now is when they come out into the pits, their wet tires are going to be a little bit newer. They've not gone through sort of the driest conditions that we'll see of the race. And so that will just keep the tires a bit better condition, give a little bit more grip, hopefully, for them for the rest of the race. As we see, that's Max Farrell, I think, continuing on past the pit entry. They're braving another lap. I think that was Farrell. No, apologies, that was not Farrell. Farrell is still here in the final sector. But yeah, decisions to be made. Most people have made the crossover to wet tires now, and just a couple of people to do so, and most of them are in the pits. Max Farrell is the last car, and they are entering the pits as well. So just Charlie Morgan to get round with their broken rear wing, and trying to see, I think that is everyone. Frank Fevic is showing still on dry tires, having just left the pit lane, so maybe a mistake from the Ferrari driver. And unfortunately, with having lost their rear wing, Ollie Knowles in the Porsche GT3 has retired, and looks like it's heading down to pit exit. Elvin Blomqvist has managed to jump SimHound to retake the lead.
Indeed, and SimHound's in a bit of an awkward position here. Obviously, he can get his pit limit off and get going as he crosses the line, but he'll have to be, I think, a little bit hesitant with the Ferrari up ahead. But both these guys seeming like they're getting it going again, straight out of the pits, already wrestling with the wet conditions and on their way to continue their battle down the Kemmel Straight towards the this is Johnny actually showing as stopped, and perhaps that's why there's a couple of cars there involved. Let's maybe catch a replay and see what happened there. A McLaren there also without their wing. That's Darren Wilkes, I'm going to say, tentatively. And Johnny Ashley looks like he's also missing something critical near his boots, perhaps.
Yeah, missing the rear wing as well. Very curious to see what happened here. I think there's a hypercar involved as well. So we come here, Charlie Morgan a little bit wide, and you haven't quite seen if the two tangled coming into the corner. Here it is, the McLaren going slowly on the inside, and then they come together on the apex at very high speed corner. Both of them are easily making the wall and sustaining heavy damage. And then that was hypercar seen as Charlie Morgan with a lack of rear wing already, trying to get back to the pits, but these drivers having to make a second stop in just as many laps, I think. Because of that, that's going to cost them a lot of time, and yeah, it's certainly going to bring an end to Johnny's win streak, unfortunately, as yeah, Johnny was doing very well so far this season. Yeah, I think he'll be very disappointed with that.
Yeah, certainly. At least they're not too far away from the pit lane. There is a chance then to repair that and continue, unlike obviously Ollie Knowles, I believe, who has had to retire. But also Johnny and McLaren, next time you have a crash, do it where the cameras can see. Completely couldn't see them whatsoever, but unfortunately 37 minutes to go, a long time to wrestle with these conditions and get used to it as well. I think, as you say, all the drivers have stopped as well, and we've seen them put on tyres. Elvin Blomqvist, by the way, showing is 15, now 16 seconds away from the lead. It's really dropping off. So Son Angel, we were criticising them moments ago, but seems to have pulled it off, Scotty. Obviously, they will have to stop, I'd imagine anyway, and top up that virtual energy and maybe some fuel. But seems to be fine. We don't know what kind of wear they've sustained though on those wet tyres, and maybe will that become more apparent, you know, in 20 minutes or so as the race goes on. They are struggling still, but you know, so are the drivers with new wet tyres.
Yeah, that gap's still sort of fluctuating. I think there are little things still to sell down there, so we'll check up on it shortly. But more importantly, I think we'll need to check the previous lap times. Of course, last laps were I-laps for Blomqvist and Tut, so they're not representative. So we'll have to wait and see how... when we get to the end of this lap, of course, there'll be traffic affected as well, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to get a read into the pace. Currently, last lap, Angel did a 2:19.4. A lot of people behind them went quicker. Quickest of the last lap was Alfie Bevan, who did a 2:15.2, as we see Gomez here trying to get back into pit lane, coming into the bus stop. Looked to be very safe on the brakes, and then just behind an Aston and locked the tyres up as they were going for the pit entry and slid onto the grass. Very uncommon mistake there. But yeah, on mistake there, but they've got going again, and luckily for them, avoided the wall as they come in for a pit stop. They were already on the wet tyres, so it is a bit of an odd call there to come into the pits. I wonder if some drivers are already picking up penalties, or have maybe made some mistake in the pit lane.
Yeah, certainly that's a possibility. It is an odd one, definitely. But it's showing you as well how treacherous the grass can be. They go onto the grass and all of a sudden they're going perfectly straight, even with the wheels turned, obviously. So really treacherous out there, and it is worth risking, or maybe not worth risking, sorry, to gain a little bit extra lap time using widening the curves. And the curves themselves obviously tricky in the wet as well, as we continue to watch Fingertas chase down Ben Brown, obviously after the pit stops, staying where they were beforehand. Fairly even stop. And also the virtual energy on the screen, we can see Angel 43% compared to the guys who have stopped. Again, 65%, looks like the lowest of that from Max Farrell. Maybe Angel can go to the end, I don't know. It'll be really close if they can, but yeah, tricky.
43% when we have like just under 60% of the race to go. I don't think it's going to work out for them, to be perfectly honest. But hey, there's still a lot of time to fuel save. But yeah, the gap at the front is coming down. 2:16.0 for Blomqvist, 2:15.4 for Tut versus a 2:19. So over nearly 4 seconds gained for Blomqvist and Tut on Angel. But they are going to be fighting each other, as Tut, as said, 6/10 quicker than Blomqvist, putting the pressure on for was P2 currently, but could very well be the lead of the race in the not too distant future. But we'll continue watching this GT3 battle. This is for P5 in the GT3 class after the pit stops, as they head into the source. You can see how the gap's still that big gap between second and third. But sort of the GT3, unfortunately, after that round of pit stops, have in general spread out a little bit, but we've still got some close battles, including the fight for the hypercar lead, which is getting a little interesting as they're heading into the bus stop chicane. Blomqvist running in a bit deep here as they were passing the yellow Mustang in the background. Bumper exit from Sed and Tut out of the chicane, just giving a little bit of breathing room back to Blomqvist, but Tut does look to be the more comfortable and quicker driver in these conditions, going 1.2 seconds quicker last lap. So Tut, the much quicker driver, but has to get the move done, closing in as they come down to a Rouge, but not point to make the overtake. Can see both drivers cutting the rally on apex a little bit. by the slipstream now for the Cadillac. Blomqvist immediately defending to the inside, come back to the racing line. Tut doesn't quite have enough momentum, and in the end breaks a little bit earlier to back out the move. Has Blomqvist got slowed down? Have indeed for the Com. And Senta is going to have to follow around for a bit longer. Gets onto the gravel a little bit there as they're trying to push back up to the rear bumper of the Ferrari. And they're still closing in very quickly to Angel. Big sideways moment trying to get the power down for the Cadillac. A lot of movement on the wheel for Tut. Really sort of aggressive, really pointy driving from them. Not smooth in the slightest as they now come through. Pion again just start balancing the throttle, balancing the steering. Now got past the GT3 Aston Martin, braking now for the chicane, running a little bit deep. Yeah, still just all over the rear bumper of the yellow Ferrari in front of them. Not quite as close as they were last lap. But yeah, another big slide onto the gravel, and yeah, that's just going to give Blomqvist a bit more breathing room as Tut maybe pushing a little bit too hard, trying to make a move on Blomqvist.
Indeed, let's right on board with Blomqvist for a little while. Just see his technique perhaps compared to Sen Tut's more aggressive, reacting to those micro slides that he's feeling as he's putting the power down into the braking zone now, obviously. Keep steering wheel straight while you're on the brakes. He goes really deep, actually, does Blomqvist, and that gives Sen Tut a massive chance to get past you as he comes to the final. But similarly, Tutton, seeing the mistake, eager to get past him again, puts the throttle down maybe a bit too early, and also costs himself a little bit of time with getting the rear out there as they go through turn 1 now. Both these drivers clearly feeling the pressure, having to get past the GT3 traffic now as they head up towards Eau Rouge and Raidillon.
Yeah, the conditions continue to get wetter. The rain is heavier than any point it was in qualifying. The track's still getting wetter. Slide there for Tut as they came up Eau Rouge and Raidillon. Coming up on a yellow Mustang, but again, they should easily get past as we pass the halfway mark of the race. Tut in the slipstream looks to the outside of Lake Com. How confident is Blomqvist going to be on the brakes after that mistake into the bus stop chicane? Is not confident enough to stop Tut from going around the outside, but Blomqvist returns the favour through the second apex, and Tut tries now for a cutback. Will give him the inside for the hairpin, and there's Angel right in front of them as Tut trying to slow the car down, just about does so before firing it into the side pod of the Ferrari. Still trying to stick the nose up the inside. It'll be the outside for the left-hander here. Can they hold it the long way around? They try to. Just a little tap of the gravel is enough to cause the car to slide and allow Blomqvist to hold on to the position, but Blomqvist is now going to try and find a way past Angel, who they've been rapidly catching up to. And yeah, it should, in theory, be an easy move with how much quicker these cars are than Angel, but passing is anything but simple, especially when you have the spray to contend with. We'll have to see how much of a defense Angel picks up as well. I imagine they might. It'll be a fairly relaxed defense, just knowing how much more they're struggling, how much older their tires are. A little bit onto the gravel for Angel. You can see the bottom of the car sparking off of the curb, and that gives Blomqvist the run as they head up to Blanchemont. Blomqvist will probably go wait till after the chicane, though these cars will have to deal with the GT3. There's a McLaren's going to stick to the right-hand side just to let all of these hypercars through. Tut is going to be the most compromised of three, but Angel, well deep on the brakes, doesn't make the chicane and is going to try and rejoin. Jumps over the sausage curb a little bit. Tut's still struggling with tracking out of the chicane as these two drivers retake the first two positions. Tut still though trying to take the lead. Blomqvist a little bit defensive into the hairpin, but Tut running quite a bit wide and loses the car under acceleration. They just about keep it out of the wall, but doing so have lost a lot of time. Angel will go back for P2, and look who's in the background. Alfie Ben, very quick driver, is starting to close in on these podium positions.
Yeah, certainly. Alfie Ben been very quick, and his lap times as well have been quicker than Tut and Blomqvist. Obviously, those two have been fighting. Bevan just on his own, the unstoppable force heading towards these two as well. And Sun Angel's pace, by the way, worth mentioning quickly, 5-6 seconds slower as it stands. Obviously the tyres will wear for the other guys too, and that difference will calm down a little bit, but you have to think that strategy has not worked at all for Sun Angel. At this pace they're going to be losing place after place, and they still have to stop, and you'd imagine they'd have to stop and change tyres. So will be interesting to see if Sun Angel maybe can do some damage control perhaps, and stay as high up the order as they can. While that was going on as well, we also had a yellow flag for Baton for Toy here. I think he actually had a big issue. Let's have a quick replay of that for Toy in the other Peugeot, this time with a wing. They're coming through the bus stop. Just gets the power on too soon, avoids the wall but sideways, and cost themselves a big chunk of time there, unfortunately. Ben Brown still in the battle as well in the GT3 field, and looks to be the only car really in the GT3 field close enough for a battle for a little while at least. But Ben Brown this time behind Tricky Tass, so those two have swapped places at some point, Scotty, and unfortunately we missed that. But Tricky Tass looking like he was a second quicker last lap as well, so maybe now he's passed Ben Brown, he can get on his way to start chasing down Athel Baskar, who's only 1.5 seconds ahead of him.
Yeah, that move happening last lap, presumably looking at those lap times. So it'll be interesting to see what pace Tricky Tass has over Basker. Was even making that pass last lap, we presume. 1.4 seconds quicker than Basker, so give it another lap and the Ferrari could be on the back of the McLaren as we side by side trying to get the move done again on Angel, as we see Bevan in the background cutting the chicane drivers, really struggling with traction and braking for these slow speed corners. Little slide into the hairpin for Tut as they're coming up on a Fuskin just in front of them. But yeah, showing just how difficult these conditions are. The track is back to a flooded state. The rain still heavier than it was at any point in qualifying, and yeah, the times much slower than what we were seeing earlier. Best times we're seeing is a 2:23 last lap set by Dave Wood as they try and catch up to Nick Manders for P5.
Indeed. Nick himself is down one position, unfortunately, from the start. For Bevan, obviously up a couple of places. Another yellow flag there. Unfortunately, can't quite tell who that is, but those are going to be a constant throughout the rest of the race, I am sure. Athel Baskar here. Still, passed by Tricky Tass. I'm looking at the completely wrong section of the screen. I apologise, but Athel Baskar, now behind Tricky Tass. We see Tricky in the Ferrari just ahead as they head towards No Name, I believe. Ben Brown still kind of in the picture, just in the background in his Aston Martin, as obviously the hypercars lap them. But Athel Baskar here with a bit of a counter-attack, a charge back towards the Ferrari. Looks to the inside, actually, towards Buon. That'd be incredibly brave, especially in these conditions. The Ferrari maybe just slightly put off by that as well, and being kind of compromised, let me completely rephrase before I say that, but compromised by a mind punt, if you like. The Ferrari here, it's defending with all its might from McLaren, but McLaren showing like it's got some pace. Maybe the wake-up call for Baskar with the Ferrari getting past. Now they're trying to get that position back and look to be fairly strong in doing so.
Yeah, it was a mistake, a wide moment from the Ferrari that gives the McLaren a chance. And Tass probably just still flustered having made that. Is sort of refocused at the end of the middle sector here and is starting to eke that gap back out. So Ben Brown will be trying to close down on the McLaren and try and get themselves back up to P5. We've come back to Dave Wood, as mentioned, was closing up to Nick Manders, who of course had a very poor start to this race, lost many positions, dropping from 4th all the way to the bottom end of the top 10, but has been slowly climbing back up, and with the pit stops actually got themselves up to P5. Is currently 5 seconds off of Angel, who they will be catching at quite a quick rate. So yeah, we should see that close up as Dan Tomlinson has also just gone past Tyler Hammer a little further back. See Dave Wood having to cut the Radeon Apex and maybe a little bit distracted running onto the grass. As we look back through the spray, really intense. The rain has actually eased up a little bit here, but whether it's enough to allow the track to dry up is another question. It's still about as heavy as it was during the qualifying session, but not as heavy as it was a few minutes ago. Ben Brown has also just made the move on a Basker for P5 in the GT3 field, down or up the Kemmel Straights. The McLaren trying to come back once again like it did on the Ferrari. Can it be a little bit more successful this time round? Is looking to the inside of the awkward hairpin. Isn't quite far enough alongside. Ben Brown's trying to turn in, but the McLaren has got itself alongside, has got the nose in front, but Ben's going to try and come back, gets the momentum on the exit, but the McLaren's not going to be the one trying to hang around the outside, but it's just too wide, nearly gets into the gravel, and will give up the spot to the Aston Martin driver. Ben Brown up to P5, Basker down to P6, where they qualified within the GT3 field. But Ben Brown up 6th place is still on a really good race.
Indeed, a couple of hypercars also showing like they've got some fight in them with 21 minutes to go. Daniel Lindblom here, who's not far away from Dan Tomlinson. These two seem to find themselves together week after week, and I've just noticed, so they've changed their liveries once again to help us out, but they've both done it in sync, so excellent stuff there as they try and navigate the GT3 field, of course, and then get on with their own battles. Dan Lindblom here, sorry, does have Tyler Hammer also in the background that he's trying to be mindful of, I'm sure. Tyler Hammer a bit slower last lap, but seems to have seems to be closing in somehow on Daniel Lindblom briefly. Those gaps just open and close so quickly, Scotty. My time speed lights up. 3 fights in the hyperclass field, and suddenly they will get going again. I wonder perhaps if that's anything to do with hairpins.
Hairpin traffic. Struggling with the conditions as we see Seddon Tutt is actually facing the wrong way here. I'll try and get a replay of what's happened here, but coming up are Rouge and Raidon. Have they had a look at the rear ends? Just gone completely, nothing that they can do. Spin round, heavy hit on the wall. Luckily for them, doesn't lose any tires, doesn't lose their rear wing, but you can guarantee that those right-hand side tires are not going to be facing in the straight-on direction. Is wide for Dan Tomlinson, and Lindblom goes through, so does the blue Cadillac of Tyler Hammer. And yeah, very costly mistake there, losing 2 places for Dan Tomlinson, running wide out of T1.
Indeed, and gaining another place in the hypercar field there. Stevie Bain also in the background, making his way through the GT3 field, about halfway through that field, so long way to go yet, but just proving again how tricky it is in these conditions as well, especially as Dan Thompson tries to regain those positions he lost on Tyler Hammer there, trying to also wrestle the rear of that Cadillac. Obviously the tyres having a bit more abuse perhaps than one Tyler's had with that recent incident, as they try and get through the GT3 there of the McLaren GT3 car, even going around the long right hand here, ever so patient on the throttle before you can finally get it going again, before so quickly does No Name appear and you have to get on the brakes again. Wiggling even out the corner there is Dan Thompson, and actually there's a yellow flag for Seddon Tutt, who has had a big off. Let's have another replay of that as well. Driver seemingly struggling again at this 40-minute mark in the race.
As if these conditions weren't treacherous enough, having quite a lot of damage, I assume, doesn't make things easier, especially when you've got to come up and pass a GT3 car. Yeah, just distracted in the spray, running deep into the gravel, into the barriers as well, adding further damage that will need to be repaired at the pit stop. Yeah, it's going to be a long time for Tutt in pit lane when they eventually get back there. They're coming that instant that we seen at the top of Raidon was about 2 minutes ago, and they're still not back in pit lane. Just is the length of this lap and the conditions that we have today. But yeah, it's been certainly a bit of a struggle. As you see, that's a Ferrari off into the gravel at T1.
Yes, it's not tricky to TAS, and therefore I don't know who else it could be. But unfortunately, indeed, Ferrari off there briefly. And struggling also is Tricky Taz coming out of the final corner as Sim Tuts obviously eventually enters the pits and indeed will repair that damage. And maybe get some new tyres as well, who knows. Dave Wood also closing down on Nick Manders, like he's been doing for a while there, going a little bit wide through the fast right there, trying to also navigate the McLaren hypercar GT3, which is the kind of a mirror position of last lap really, as they go through again the long right hander closing in. It can be so tempting to get the power down when you see a car closing in your mirror, but if you do that too early, obviously it can cost you more time than it would have done otherwise, if you see what I mean. Also looking at the track and the weather conditions, the rain seems to have been lightening Scotty, and also that's we're looking at, for instance, Son Angel's lap time, last lap 2:26. That's only 2 seconds-ish now off the rest of the field, so maybe they can salvage this.
Yeah, the rain is come back down to drizzle. Looks like it might even stop. The track is starting to dry up again a little bit, so we should start to see the times getting quicker again. So maybe we'll start to see maybe sub 220s soon. And that'll hopefully help the drivers gain a little bit of confidence again, start being able to push a little bit more. So you see a little snap there for Dan Tomlinson out of no name. They've got themselves back in front of Tyler Hammer into P7, and will be trying to chase down Daniel Lindblom if they can, but we'll return to this battle for P4 a little bit wider for Nick Manders out of Blanchemont, as Dave Wood still putting the pressure on, seems to have a little bit more potential pace, but not able to run the laps consistently enough to keep the pressure on and get in front. Ooh, that's actually quite interesting. Nick Manders 28% on the energy. Nick Manders is gonna be a bit tight here to the end. Compared to everyone else around them, everyone else should be able to run easy flat out. Nick Manders will be hoping that the rain kind of comes back, keeps the track a little bit wetter to make it a little easier on the energy for them. But if it continues to dry out, it's a big wobble there for Dave Wade up a Rouge and Radion. That's where Dave Wade seems to be struggling the most. And is what's making this difficult is this overtake, as difficult as it is, because they keep losing about a second or so up a Rouge and Radion. That gap opens up, and your best overtaking point up the Campbell Straight with the slipstream. Well, Dave Wade's just nowhere to be seen, and immediately right on the rear bumper of the Ferrari, both of which run wide into the gravel out of Lake Hom, and is then trying to make a move where it's arguably most difficult to make a move in the middle sector, but an opportunity might be arising soon. We can see a bit of spray for a car in front. That is the Peugeot of Son Angel, still struggling, is running about a second or two slower than these two drivers as they look to the inside for Dave Wood, puts the car down the inside with authority. Nick Manders barely leaving just enough space, but Dave Wood is going to get the move done, trying to decide which way to pass the GT3 McLaren, and Dave Wood is now up to P4.
Indeed, and that's one position down from Nick from the start and one position up for Dave from the start. Interestingly, by the way, considering they were a moments ago dead even since the start, Nick Manders with a 14-second stop, the quickest in the hypercar field, and obviously the virtual energy being lower explains that, as there's a mistake there from Son Angel in the Peugeot. Lets Dave Wood fly on by with ease and actually gave Nick Manders as well a glimpse of hope, perhaps, of catching up and regaining the podium. Regaining P4. But here comes a counterattack from Son in the Peugeot as they head towards the bus stop. I think he's dropped back a little bit now and actually looks to defend from Nick as Dave goes a bit deep and gives the opportunity back to the Peugeot. Peugeot looking for a switchback, and Nick also trying to follow him through on that line as they go almost side by side down the start finish straight. Dave just grabs the lead there, and they continue on in the order. Nick looking to the inside into turn one, onto the brakes against the Peugeot, however, keeping it tight. Compromises his run, has a bit of a wobbly moment as well on the exit, and I think that'll diffuse things momentarily as they head up towards Eau Rouge and the Camel Straight. But just finishing that thought there, considering the stop was so much quicker, 12 seconds quicker than Dave's stop, for instance, it's a wonder Nick's not gained any more positions from that, and maybe limited with pace as he goes on past the Peugeot. And Daniel Lindblom's actually showing as a big issue here. We'll grab a replay quickly as they are currently down in P10.
Yeah, we'll come back to that of, a lot of spinning for the Cadillac. Looks like it
That's a lot of
has
spinning.
collected. Yeah, it looks like it has collected the wall to cause that much spinning. I think we've got a little further back and I see what actually caused this. You would have also noticed the wipers stopped on most of the cars for a moment. They're back on again. The rain stopped briefly, but yeah, just taking too wide on the entry to Blanchimont. Didn't get the car turned in, slid off into the barrier and came on quite spectacularly and pinned the throttle to spin the car off the racing line, which good quick thinking there from Lindblom. But is now being repositioned in their pit box as they repair all that damage that they have just picked up. Angel right on the back of Manders once again, and Tyler Hammer now on the back of Zach Silver for P7.
Indeed, here chasing him down again. GT3 cars a constant in this race of everyone having to get past them as they head towards No Name. A little bit of a wiggle from the Cadillac. That seems kind of not iconic, but signature really from you know, Tyler Hammer and names fail me. It seems like a common thing, shall we say, in the Cadillac field as he chases down Zach Silver, who's edging out a bit of a lead here from Tyler. Although Tyler did have a ignore me. We'll ignore that thought.
Tyler was a little slow last lap, 26.5 versus Zach Silver's 22.3. So obviously lost the position with 4 seconds worth of time. So yeah, Zach Silver, I'd expect with that difference, that must have been a mistake from Hammer, as they've been able to stick right on the tail end of Zach Silver throughout this lap. But yeah, has dropped down to P8 because of that. Also, while we're watching this, Sony Angel did repass Nick Manders, who I think has realised how much how little energy they've put into their car and how much they need to lift and coast. Their pace dropping off a lot to 28.3 last lap. That's actually 10 seconds slower than our leaders. So yeah, Nick Manders in a bit of strife. And luckily has nearly 40 seconds back to Dan Tomlinson, who's now coming under pressure actually from Zach Silver as a sort of three-way hypercar fight is starting to emerge here. We can see all 3 Cadillacs. Zach Silver thinking about move up through a Rouge and Radion, but just backs out of it, takes it safely as the rain is starting to get a little bit heavier once again, as it returns to prevent the track from drying up past the BMW GT3 car. It's not going to be quite close enough for Zach Silver into the braking zone of Le Comte to try and move, but has just under 10 minutes to go, which isn't too many laps around this really long Spa, 7 kilometers long of course, and in these conditions is quite the long lap.
Indeed, these 9 minutes are going to feel like a lot longer than 9 minutes, that's for sure, as Zach Silver continues on, as you were saying, chasing down Dan Tomlinson. Interestingly as well, top speeds, even though these guys are both in Cadillacs, Dan Tomlinson 4 kph quicker than Zach Silver at any point in the circuit. So obviously getting a better run, perhaps out of turn 1, I'd imagine, than Zach Silver is getting. That's certainly going to help him defend, as you say, in that crucial spot, the most obvious point to overtake another car as they head up towards Stavelot, I'm going to say. Yep, Cadillac on Cadillac, just keeping there. Dan Thompson has to just keep on track. Obviously we saw him with the oh sorry, I was thinking of Liberal, ignore that. It's been a long race. And yeah, thank you for the follow, and thank you for the save actually. Play there, saved by the follow.
Yes, we do have a few battles starting to line up towards the end of this race, including this one here. James Cuddy on the back of Basker, trying to find a way through on the McLaren. We've seen Baskers are struggling, or they're being passed by Trinket Tass and Ben Brown. Trinket Tass has actually got themselves onto the podium in front of Matthias Fusken, and they're fighting Ferrari coming up behind them. I believe it is Blomqvist 3 wide into the chicane. A lot of wheel-to-wheel contact between the Ferrari and McLaren. Flash of the lights from the McLaren as well. but it's just an awkward timing from both of them. No one is in the wrong. They're just Blomqvist wants to get on with his race, hold his 5-second lead to Bevan, and these two want to continue fighting over P6 in the GT3 field. The Mustang not being able to get the move done in the end, and it's going to be all over the rear bumper of that McLaren up to Blanchemont. It's going to have another hypercar he has to dig to the grass to get the move done there for Bevan. Very sketchy, but Bevan obviously thinks they still have a chance to take the lead of the race. Was 2 seconds quicker than Blomqvist last lap. Those drivers are about to come across the line again, so we'll see if Bevan is still closing down that gap despite having to take to the grass that time around. We see struggling for traction out of the chicane still for the GT3s. Another 1.4 seconds gain for Alfie Bevan, so it could be a last lap battle between the Cadillac and the Ferrari. But struggle for traction, a big slide, and Masker is giving up P6 for James Cowley there out of the source.
Indeed, that was crucial. And anywhere else, yeah, maybe there's a bit of potential for a comeback, but yeah, they've dropped off here a bit, going up Rouge and Radeon, and the gap is growing, so he isn't unfortunately able to have a counter-attack so quickly, so easily, and edge some track position back. Tyler Hammer also closing on Zach Silver still. Last lap, again, slightly slower, but seems to have these moments where he's able to have a little bit of a run on Zach Silver, but clearly isn't as fast in other areas of the track, which is obviously is as important as well. Christian Slink also, by the way, in the T3 field, catching up to Olaf Badej here. A little bit quicker last lap, 3/10 quicker last lap. Gap is about 3/10 as well as they head up towards the bus stop chicane. Sticking in the slipstream as much as they can. Gap isn't closing that much. They do have a hypercar as well in the background. They're going to have to let through at some point. The hypercar actually trying to get out of the way, it looked like, on the outside there in the braking zone. That's the Alpine of Jacob Hein, I believe, as they come through the final corner. Mustang not looking so strong there. The McLaren sticking with the slipstream as well as much as they can, sticking in the mirrors as well as of the Mustangs. They head towards turn 1. And again, that gap is just fixed at 3/10. But this is the crucial corner now, going through turn 1. A little bit wider entry there for the McLaren. A little bit of a squiggly moment as well on the exit, and that gap briefly grew before it's now coming down again as they get into the slipstream, approaching the Eau Rouge and Radeon complex. You don't want to be too close as you go through this. Obviously, you could end up having to compromise yourself really and lifting instead. But going up the hill, all safe and sound for now. But it looks like the Mustang was just quick enough there that he's able to hold off the McLaren.
It has just opened that gap up a little bit, being a slight bit braver, and has defended as that is for Toy, who has spun coming out of the bus stop. I can tell you from where they're parked, that is classic spinning the rear wheels up on the exit, as they were behind a yellow Cadillac. Couldn't tell you which one. There's a few too many in the field to distinguish, and that's Alfie Bevan. Could tell by the leader lights being on, and yeah, just trying to be down the bar and a spin off towards the wall. Let's go try and spin the car here and be careful not to hit the wall. Also wait for a little bit of a gap, and I think does get the cars around and quick the cut there as we rejoin to live images over the top of Radeon. But yeah, for 25 seconds behind Dave Spiller for the final points paying position of P10. Is unlikely to be scoring points here tonight, unfortunately for them.
Indeed. 3.5 minutes to go. Then let's have another look at the virtual energy, shall we? Because it's coming out at that crucial moment. Has Nick and Angel done enough? It's going to be close. Nick Manders obviously lifting incredibly. 2:31 last lap for Nick Manders, assuming there was no issues, just based on lifting and coasting, trying to get to the end and avoid that critical penalty. And again, trying to avoid using the pit lane as well. It's such a long time, and it might just be worth lifting and coasting and maintaining as many positions as you can on track and getting to the end there. Similarly, 2:30 for Son Angel, which is over 10 seconds, really, to the average of the field.
it's going to be extreme lifting coast for Angel. Might even be borderline dangerous with how much he'll have to do. Well, there isn't long to go and the conditions are back to the worst that we've seen this race. Spray picking up as track has got wetter. Zach Silver having to go round the outside of the McLaren, who very generously leaves the inside open for Tyler Hammer through the second apex. The track is getting slower. Luckily for Angel, Alvin Blomqvist, who is just crossing the line now, will be starting the final lap of the race, but it is still one of the longest laps as Hammer looking to the inside of Zach Silver, getting a little close for comfort, it could be said, between the two Cadillacs. Luckily, they're both pointing the right way, but that's just going to allow Dan Tomlinson, who's only a second in front of these two cars, can just see them in the foreground there, through Puon, maybe getting away. That these drivers, potentially P6 is on the cards, but maybe could go a little further as trying to pass into the pits. Big blunder on the strategy. They've just miscounted how many laps there were going to be, and they've had to pit from P3 in the GT3 field. How unfortunate for them.
Indeed, and yeah, this late in the race, there's not much you can do to come back, unfortunately, as these three continue to fight. In first place, by the way, led the GT3 field, continues to lead the GT3 field, and it's just been driving without issue. We haven't seen much of them, obviously, but they've just been doing a great job, really. I just have to just mention that as Steve Bain finally gets through the last of the GT3 cars, or I should say the first, if you like, as Tyler Hammer runs a bit wide there at Blanchard, unfortunately. Again, you don't want to pick up a penalty here. Long trip through the pit lane. There's 1, 2 cars go deep there, not 3, unfortunately. Not 3, ignoring the adjective, but yeah, that's given. Again, Tyler Hammer, a glimpse of hope against Zach Silver and Dan Thompson, these two yellow and black Cadillacs in front of him, and a third yellow and black Cadillac actually there as he goes deep into the brakes there on the inside, trying to get 2 positions from here. We see a Cadillac up onto the gravel there as well. That's going to be Dan Tomlinson, yes, unfortunately repeating an error we saw earlier in the race.
Yeah, that might put him out of this battle for P6 that Tyler Hammer has now got themselves up to, but it's going to be side by side up the camel strip between these two. Zach Silver's being able to carry more momentum up the straight and has got themselves back in front, but late on the brakes from the Cadillac. Can they get it slowed down? Contact between the two of them. Zach Silver has pushed the blue Cadillac of Hammer off the track. Hammer's probably going to give the place up for overtaking off the track, but it's going to try and come back almost immediately. Zach Silver actually realizes, yeah, hang on, I pushed you off there, I'm going to let you have that back. And that has brought Dan Tomlinson right back into this battle. Is off wide off the track for Tyler Hammer, and they've just given the place right back to Zach Silver. Dan Tomlinson is going to be looking at this and thinking, oh yeah, opportunity really is on for them as they're heading into the middle sector. Time has ran out and Elvin Blomqvist has already finished the race, but we'll continue watching this battle for P6 and run through the entire finishing order once everyone has finished. So to not make things confusing, we've got 2 yellow Cadillacs, 2 blue Cadillacs, one of which is is a lap down. I believe that is Sent Hunt. Yes, Sent Hunt right at the back end of this field. Make things a little more interesting. There's Ferrari GT3 car that they all have to go round, and Dan Tomlinson just wrong place, wrong time for it. It's going to get caught out for this. Not going to be able to get past before Stavalo, and that will leave Tyler Hammer alone to fight with Zach Silver. They're closing in as they come up to Blanchimont. Can they find a way to get alongside? Who's going to be a little braver through Blanchimont? Tyler Hammer not able to carry the speed through the spray, through the dirty air. It's going to be who can get through the bus stop cleanly, and Zach Silver has got the car slowed down, is cleanly through. Can they get the power down cleanly? They do indeed. They keep it on the straight line, and they will take P6 on the final lap. Tyler Hammer will have to settle for P7. Dan Tomlinson will take P8, and that is most cars across the line as we come into an end of a very difficult race, it should be said, with the conditions. Yeah, getting very heavy rain. Track flooded once again towards the end of the race, and we even had a bit of sort of thunder and lightning, according to the timing screen, just where the severity of these wet conditions.
Indeed, what a race! What, some battles there all the way to the end. Some great stuff, and what a weather! That sentence. What conditions? It was incredible. Seeing the rain in the qualifying, and then suddenly dry and warm race starts, and then a bit of rain suddenly, and it didn't stop completely. And it was just kind of teasing, as you say, a bit of a storm conditions there. But yeah, very, very interesting. And unfortunately, I think as much as Angel finished fourth, great job, I think it was a bit of a blunder starting on the wets.
Yeah, I mean, they qualified third. Could they have finished third if they started on slicks? I would say so. I think they could have. So yeah, I think Angel's going to be a bit disappointed there. But as you mentioned, the rain really threw a curveball. I don't think the rain coming a little bit earlier than expected was the main thing. It then started to dry out towards the sort of final third of the race. And you're thinking, oh, maybe it's going to go dry again to the end. And then the rain got really heavy again. The rain, it didn't know what it wanted to do, let alone the drivers knowing what the rain was going to do. Yeah, that made things incredibly tough. And yeah, well done to the drivers for surviving it on the most part. And let's go through the order that they finished in. Elvin Blomqvist holding on to the lead from pole position. Only 1.9 seconds in the end to Alfie Bevan, who was putting in a late race charge after a poor qualifying. Qualified down in 6th. Good race up to 2nd. Would have liked a little bit longer to try and take the lead. Dave Wood taking the final podium slot in a good race, having qualified P5. I imagine he will be quite happy of that. In front of the Angels, the only driver to start on the wet tyres. P4's not that bad of a result, but having qualified P3, I imagine they're quite disappointed. Nick Manders had a poor start, drop to the bottom end for the top 10, but did manage to recover up to P5. And Zach Silver would take P6 in the end, beating out Tyler Hammer and Dan Tomlinson in a three-way Cadillac fight in the final laps. Max Farrell would be best of the Porsches in P9 ahead of Dave Spiller, who rounds out the points, pace positions and the top 10, just in front of Vertoy in the near Peugeot. Dan Lindblom and Seddon Tutt having that crash over Radion. We'd have to settle for 13th. Have Charlie Morgan in the Soul BMW. Gomez had a mistake, had to pit for damage, ends up 15th. Has Stevie Bain, who had that instant losing a wheel on the opening lap through Erosion Radion, will finish 16th, just beating all of the GT3 cars on overall positions. And Jacob Hine, who had their own issues, would be last of our hypercar finishers. On to the GT3 pack, and it'd be Leon Vesperas who took the victory from P1 on grid. Hef Pustek qualifying P2 and finishing P2 as well. Fuskin find themselves up into second place, just in front, 3.5 seconds in front of Ben Brown, who once again another brilliant charge from them, having qualified down in P11 up to P4 in the GT3 field, just missing out on back-to-back podiums. James Cowley would finish down in P5 ahead of Athel Basker for P6. Paul O'Grady would take P7 ahead of Tim Bob in 8th, trying to task that pit stop on the final lap from P3, dropping them all the way down to P9. And Ben Knight would take the final points positions in P10. Christian Schlink, we just missed out in P11 ahead of Badej in 12th. Johnny Ashley, incident with the McLaren at Blanchimont, would unfortunately give them a lot of damage and we'd leave them down in 13th. Tom Watson, 14th, have Ryan Davies, who had a technical issue, finishing down in 15th. Frank Vivic in 16th, have Dean Smith in 17th, Jack Page 18th, Darren Wilkes down in 19th, and Ollie Knowles not finishing with too much damage to be able to recover the car back to the pit lane. Rounds out 20th for our biggest GT3 field that we've had this series so far.
Indeed. And that's another race done, another week completed in the LMU series, and I'm stalling again as usual to look at the next race. Here we go. Oh, fantastic. Well, it's Le Mans Ultimate, and what's Le Mans Ultimate without Le Mans, Scotty? So next week, fantastic track, we're at Le Mans, and not only is it Le Mans? It's 90 minutes of Le Mans for our series finale. I'm very excited.
Yes, we are you could say maybe gearing up towards our next season of Le Mans Ultimate. I'll not give away any more than that. But yes, final 60-minute race done for the season. 90 minutes to come next time by Le Mans. One of the easiest tracks, the easiest track when it comes to tyre wear. I don't remember about fuel. You can do about 12 laps, and I can't remember how long of a distance that is. So I would expect that to be more than 45 minutes to keep it one stop without any tyre changes, I would imagine. But yes, it will be a little bit different. We'll have to see how the drivers manage for, yes, the sort of the staple mark of the endurance calendar. Yeah, should be a very good race. Will the Peugeot come back strong? It was strong in Monza without the chicane. Will it be strong here at Le Mans with the long Mistral straight? Be good to find out. I wonder, before we head off, maybe I don't think we're going to be able to get an update on the standings, are we?
No, I'm frantically refreshing the page, but it doesn't seem to have been... it doesn't seem to have loaded yet, unfortunately. But we'll have a look at it next week before the race, and we'll see if we can get it after the race as well, so we can see. I mean, tonight, obviously, Johnny Ash's broken his streak of wins, unfortunately. Son Angel, you mentioned the Peugeot. I think for them, it's going to be more about defending P3 in the standings and gaining any higher than that. Looking at, Alfie Bevan and Elvin Blomqvist, the points gap to Angel, those two drivers ahead of Angel in the standings. But we'll have a look next week. Definitely, I think the Peugeot is going to be strong. Maybe there'll be some surprises in terms of strategy. That's always open, obviously. And yeah, we'll have to wait and see. It'll be very interesting. I'm very excited, if I've not mentioned that already. So definitely join us then. If not for Le Mans, it's a series finale, and it'll be great to see where everyone ends up.
Yeah, will be indeed, where we round out our first season and crown our first Le Mans Ultimate champions. So yeah, make sure you're there to join us to see who will take the crowns and who may struggle down the streets. Same time, same place next week, just for a little bit longer. Don't forget, we have plenty more racing action over the next week. We have Cell Corsa with the Formula E cars tomorrow at Helsinki International. On Wednesday, we have GT3 Sprint on ACC, and on Thursday we have the continuation of our GT4 series on iRacing, and then on Sunday we will be back with our ACC series. Don't ask me where any of them are this week, I never remember, but either way it should still be some great racing before we have our finals, starting with Le Mans next week on Monday. Some great action coming up. Really looking forward to it.
Indeed. Yep. Thank you. Thank you for joining me, Scotty, tonight, and thank you everyone in chat and watching this video in the background. And thank you for racing with us. So yeah, indeed. Catch us next week. Catch us in any other streams as Scotty mentioned. But for now, I'm just going to say good night.
Good night.